Hi.
This is
I'm
our 36th episode.
36. That's a 9. So 9 is about completion. Oh. My name is Julie O'Connor, and this is,
I'm Claire Birchinoff.
and our goal is to create an episode today that informs and empowers our viewers. And we bring up topics each week that are kind of either coming, to us in our lives or kind of percolating outside of us, and try and have lively discussions that hopefully are entertaining and enriching.
Yes. And Julie and I have been friends for many, many years. And this YouTube channel kind of came about as we were just hours and hours and hours of talking on the phone about all of these things, particularly focusing on like our healing journeys, energy work. And Julie one day was like, we should be recording these conversations. And I mean, we think they're pretty entertaining and as you said, informative. So that's kind of where Vessel Vision came from, and we hope that these topics do bring something to your life. So that's who we are and what we're doing.
And why we're here. And I can't tell you the number of people who've said to me, like, you need to write a book. And I'm thinking, I'm not gonna write a book. Like I might, but not about this. I'm a better talker than executing it all like that. And so what better way to sort of share information that other people was finding useful,
Mhm.
and kind of, people were asking, and more people need to know about this. And so, well, we thought, what easier way than to just have the discussions that we're already having.
Exactly. So what are we
So
talking about?
today, on the heels of the warrior and the predator, we are talking about mental illness. There's a lot of it, and I feel connected and impacted by mental illness. And I want to advocate for those who suffer from mental illness. And want to talk about even our idea that these people are unwell. Maybe they are not doing well in an unwell world. Maybe it has more to do with what is going on around them.
Mm,
So I want to talk about it from these different perspectives, and maybe open up new ways of thinking about those that we call mentally ill.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I don't know. I did a little research on kind of the history of. I don't know if we want to start there.
well, sure.
So what we currently work off of is called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for
Yeah.
Mental Illness or whatever. So we're in like the fifth or sixth version of this uh, manual, and it was first originally published in the 1950s, like 1952, I think. But it was modeled off of the WHO's um, like collective illness manual. So
And
interesting.
the WHO is the World Health Organization, for those of you who do not know.
Yes. So it actually, you know, in the United States, they started gathering information about mental illness through the census. That was their, like, the very first one was sometime in like the mid 1800s. And it was like you had to check if you were in like a lunatic or stupid. You're like a fool. All right, that's not the right word, but like infirm of mind. And that was their way of kind of collecting, okay, how many people is this impacting? And of course at the time people didn't have language and understanding of what mental illness is, or any of that. So the only people, think about the only type of person who's going to check yes I'm a lunatic on a census,
Exactly. Exactly.
right?
I mean, come on now, right?
So then actually like leading up to the publication of the manual, it was really studying veterans after the world wars. that led to like, oh shit, there's something deeply wrong with our veterans, soldiers who have seen the most horrific thing humans can imagine, and they're not well. So it was truly the Veterans Association that was really the most impactful in getting the DSM published.
Okay, this is really interesting. So I have a lot to say about that. So thank you for that data. It's really interesting. Yeah, those men at the time, because there weren't women, well, there were nurses, were in fact seeing the aftermath of war. Those men and women that were exposed to the violence and depravity of war, they became unwell. And okay, so let's think about that. Let's think about what is playing on people's televisions in their homes every day, even on the news. The exposure to violence and suffering that is norm. I mean, it's not even Netflix, but let's talk about the news. So you see this increase in mental illness. It's PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. And then consider what all of us are exposed to every day, round the clock. How could one not have a change in the way their brain is thinking or viewing life after being inundated with so much suffering, violence, gore, and grief? I mean,
And they say that the mind isn't able to distinguish between reality and illusion. So when we're watching it, the brain doesn't know. You can tell yourself like this is not real,
right.
but the impact of what's actually happening in your brain doesn't know it's not real.
Exactly. I mean, so yes, how would people be well? How would people be well mentally?
Okay. So very interesting. There's this guy named Adolf Meyer, and he was really influential in like the first DSM version that was published. And his view was that mental disorders represented reactions to the environment, social environment, biological factors, and they removed it. So he very much was like, this is a response. This isn't the mental illness isn't causing the reality. It's a response to what's happening environmentally and within the body. And they removed it.
Well, of course they did, because uh well, I had this thought, and I did look it up to see if it was true. Claire's much better about doing research. I'm always like, my life has been research. I got plenty to say. But I was like, I better look this up before I speak this to be true. That empaths are much more likely to be labeled depressed or anxious. Their rate of mental illness, diagnosis of mental illness, is much greater. Why is that? You're an empath, right? An empath is someone who feels the suffering of others. Who, I mean, if I can't watch violence, I have to turn away because it literally makes me feel like sick and pain inside. Like I can't watch it. And so it would totally make sense that an empath would be unwell in this world, because there is so much horror. And then the fact our brains are not meant to know about the traumas happening in, wherever it's happening today. We don't, and our brain is not going to be able to synthesize that information and be well with all that.
So, Julie, maybe we could just share some of our personal experiences with mental illness, and for both Julie and I, having gone through the system, many different treatment facilities. I was in several hospital psych ward situations. We know firsthand the good intention of healthcare providers to want to help people who are shackled by a system that doesn't work. And I go back and forth with this because, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, anxiety, depression. Oh, they diagnosed me with all kinds of crazy shit. There was something else that was like, it's not bipolar, but behavioral.
I bet it was oppositional defiant disorder.
No, you don't know me. They throw around a lot of labels when you're sitting in a therapist or a psychoanalyst's office and they're like, what the fuck is going on with you? So they slap a lot of labels on. But I go back and forth with this because the program I was in, did it save me at the time? No. Did it still require my own investment in my wellness and recovery? Yes. Do I think I could have gotten to where I am without that impetus, that catalyst, the seeds that were planted in treatment? I don't know. It was deeply helpful on some surface levels that kind of kicked off my journey that let me do a deeper dive that truly led to recovery. But that's not the case with everyone.
Well, okay. So thanks for being vulnerable and telling us about that. I too, I had an eating disorder and I was depressed at a young age. Um, yeah, I was depressed. I mean, I think I was depressed like pretty early on. Um, but I truly know now it was because of my deep sensitivity. And this sensitivity has now led me to, be able to help others in really unique ways and receive, information from, I'm very sensitive and that is a gift, right? But to have that sensitivity in the world, and then there were 7 kids in my family. And so, I mean, there's 9 people about and a dog bouncing around a house with a lot of crazy. To me, it felt like a lot of craziness, like a lot of stimulation and a lot of input. And it was like too much, too much, too much. And then not to mention just whatever, some, issues within the family. And that was sad. Things that were going on were sad. And then as a child to not be understood, my mom, when she was dying, it was the biggest gift she ever gave me. I said to her, thank you for being my mother. Thanks for bringing me into the world. Like I couldn't say like, oh my God, thank you so much. You gave me so much. Like at the time, that was really all I could say. Like, thank you for bringing me into the world. And my mom said to me, I wasn't a good mother to you. She said, I didn't know how to love you. And she said, you were just so different from the others. And just her saying she didn't know how to love me was such a gift to me because it was like, that's exactly what I felt. That's why I was a depressed child because I felt like my mother couldn't love me. And so that's a normal response to be sad that your mother doesn't know how to love you. So that began kind of this, and also everything I said, I challenged my mom a lot. She had beliefs that were not mine, about the church. I'm like, I don't think that's true. I don't really believe that. I don't think God is punishing, people because of their sexuality. Like, just things that it would make her crazy. My mom would just say, stop talking. Stop talking. And then she would say to my brothers and sisters, don't look at Julie. Don't look at her. Don't listen to her. And so I developed anorexia. It was basically like, I have to live in this house. My mother does literally not want to see me. She doesn't want to hear me. She doesn't want anyone to look at me. But I can't go anywhere because I'm a person and I'm 15 years old. And so I just stopped eating. It was like, okay, I don't really know how to not be me. I don't really know how to not exist. I don't know how to not be me. And so that was how my eating disorder kind of began. That is a fucking normal response to an abnormal environment. And that's what I think about a lot of mental illness. I think it's sensitive, unique people who don't fall into the system. And in my case, it was 7 kids. You just got to fall in. Come on, we got shit we got to do here. This is the way it operates. And when you think about the world, those people that just can't fall in, they're the mentally ill. But is there really anything wrong with them for not being okay in a world that is so imbalanced? And it's funny that they're labeled the ones that are imbalanced. Oh, it's just a mental imbalance. It's a brain imbalance. It's like, no, they're reflecting the imbalance of the world.
Something you said in a previous episode is coming up now, that the person in the family, and it sounds like that's what you were kind of carrying, the person in the family who expresses the symptom. I mean, if we think about symptoms expressing through our body as our bodies attempt to heal whatever's not right within, you were expressing what's not right, what's out of balance in your family, right?
Right.
But what do we do instead? We slap labels on the symptom as the problem instead of the result of the problem, which
Right.
mirrors our entire medical system too. So,
Totally. So the people that are mentally ill, if we imagine humanity is the family of humanity, all of those that are mentally ill are an externalization of that which is not functioning well, in our planet as a species. And we make them, we make them, other, and we make them sick. And the stigma around mental illness is, I guess it's decreasing because mental illness is increasing. And so there are more and more people that are touched by mental illness. But at what point do we recognize that these systems and programs that we've created to function within as a human race isn't working? And that is evidenced by the increase in these diagnoses of mental illness.
yeah. And I was just on a college campus last week, and there's so much available for young people. Well, for anyone now, but especially for young people, that it's like, if you're struggling, get help, right? And I love that. And you're right, there is a destigmatization of it. It's like, I think especially the younger generations are much less worried about being labeled as something or being put on antidepressants for their anxiety or their depression. And I love that. At the same time, I have you seen those commercials for like Hims and Hers?
So,
I think it's supposed to be just like a general wellness. You're supposed to be able to call and talk to a therapist at any time. You're supposed to be able to get like contraceptives. You're supposed to be able to get medication for hair growth and to help you go through menopause. And it's so interesting to me. Guess what I found out?
what?
The entanglement of the pharmaceutical company with the publication of the DSM. Because now the DSM, okay, pros and cons to the system of diagnosing mental illness. Pros are that people truly can get help that they need, right? Like, there was a time I was on antidepressants that literally saved my life. Okay. They're not meant to be sustainable. You're not meant to be on an antidepressant your whole life. At least maybe that's just my perspective or my own experience. But the cons of the DSM are immense. They standardize I don't know if you know many people who have bipolar. Yes, there are some commonalities, but there are far more differences because they're a full person. They're not just a bipolar person. Okay, perfect example, the autism spectrum. Right now, we just say neurodivergent because it's such a massive spectrum. And to say someone has autism, it's like, that actually doesn't tell me much about them at all because there's so many versions of what that diagnosis looks like. But 69% of the DSM task force for publication have direct ties to the pharmaceutical company.
Of course they do. I mean, of course they do. It's drug everybody up so that we can fall into line and keep this maladaptive world spinning rather than saying, hey, if our children need drugs to feel joy, there must be something wrong with the experience of being a child today on planet Earth. I wonder what that is. Let's look at the school systems. Let's look at the fact that the parents are burnt out and stressed out and running around like crazy, trying to work and have enough money to put food on the table. And kids are coming home to an empty house and so much. Schools aren't safe. I mean, they're being bombarded with information that their tiny little brains can't handle. I mean, there's so much that we could talk about. But instead of that, because this world is spinning, it's making a lot of people a lot of money. And a lot of those people, pharmaceutical companies are running our world. So they are actually motivated to keep people unwell. They're not here to help you. So yes, there are periods of time where people quote need medication for a situational depression. But if your entire life is depressing, you gotta change something about your fucking life. Okay? You don't just take a pill and fall into line. I mean, I guess you can, but that's not what you came here to do. And those people who suffer from mental illness with that extra sensitivity, they are extra sensitive. They have gifts to be unlocked, right? And they're not able to manifest their fullest potential because they're just medicated because their body's saying, no, this world doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, think about even the line between genius and insanity, right? And we think about our greatest breakthroughs, our greatest innovations, our greatest inventions, the greatest philosophies. So many of those people struggled with some sort of abnormality, we'll just say.
And probably fanaticism is in the DSM. I mean, to be a fanatic about something, that is that line between fanatic and genius. I mean, but that could be classified as grandiosity. I mean, there's so much. That person could become a manic depressive because they believe they're going to figure out how water is speaking to us. There's this wonderful woman who's studying that, and she's fucking brilliant. The woman thinks the water is speaking to her. Well, it looks like it is by all of her experiments, but from a different lens, she thinks the water's talking to her. Oh, that's sad. And it's like, what would it mean if the water was talking to us? What if the water was giving us information? What if the water could heal us? We might not need all these drugs. So let's make the lady who talks to the water crazy. Let's make her crazy and shut that shit down.
Yeah, so you bring up a really interesting topic too, is the connection between. So I'm going to make a statement. I believe that a lot of mental disorders are a result of our disconnection from spirit, from source, from God. And I'm very interested in the connection between religion and mental illness and spirituality and mental illness as it's diagnosed. And I looked at one study that's been done, and they actually showed, and there are contradicting studies. Like, you can do a study and find that religious people are more likely to be depressed and full of shame and blah, blah, blah. There's also studies that show people who have some sort of faith are more resilient and therefore less incidences of mental illness or whatever. But in treating mental illness, it started with the church, because back in the day, and we'll just say prior to the 1500s, any kind of mental abnormality was considered a demonic possession.
Right.
So it was the church who was in charge of treating it. And of course, I'm sure y'all know the extremely barbaric treatments that have come out of trying to fix mental illness, from the most, I guess the easiest one would be like, oh, women who would just faint, or would it be, they would have hysteria, right? They would just like send them away. That was the most inane,
Right.
all the way to like, cutting out parts of your brain and severing neural connections with a lobotomy, which was just happening in like the 1950s. Okay, this is not
I know.
insane.
It's crazy.
So
Well,
the church, that's interesting to me, that it started as a belief all the way back in the day that this was a spiritual issue. Now we don't believe it's necessarily demonic possession, but it began being recognized as a spiritual issue.
well, and I mean that I remember when I was at a treatment center, and I had been to many, many, many treatment centers, and I would go through this kind of cycle of getting my weight restored to a point where it was safe and I wasn't in danger, and I'd go back out into the world and my family that I had created, my own family then, and I could only really function in that world that I had created for so long, and then I'd lose the same weight that took me 8 months to whatever. It was such a cycle, and I was disconnected from spirit and disconnected from self. And the very last treatment center I was in, I remember I went into the medical director's office, and I was lucky enough that insurance paid for my treatment because, if you're underweight and it's medically necessary, they'll pay. So, but I walked in and I said, I gotta go. I'm leaving. And I said, and it was like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. And I remember the woman's name was Lynn, who was kind of running things, and she was like, "We're just going to write it down as a weekend pass. You're going to change your mind. You'll probably come back by Monday, but if you literally just leave, like insurance, this will cause all kinds of insurance problems. It'll cause problems when you need to come back again." And I said, "I'm spiritually dying in here. This isn't about food. This is about my spirit. And I need to go restore that. And I'm not going to restore that here." And that is literally my parting words. And I left. And I've never gone back. And I've never been sick like that. I mean, yeah, has my weight, whatever. If my kids are sick, do I accidentally, drop 10 pounds? Yeah, but I don't weigh myself. I don't count calories. I don't, oh my gosh. Speak of the devil. I don't, food has no hold over me. And you know why? Because I was spiritually starving. That's what was going on. I was spiritually hungry, and I couldn't find a way to satisfy that hunger. And so I decided I'm never going to be hungry, and then I won't feel that loss, and I won't feel that disconnect. And it was all about spirit. And yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Claire. And people who don't feel accepted or valued, they're going to be depressed. People that are sidelined and marginalized and told that their ideas are crazy, or that's not, you know what I'm saying? Like that, I remember someone we both know. She had been depressed for years and years and years and years and years, and wanted to die, wanted to kill herself. And one day I just said to her, "Your life's depressing. It makes 100. Why wouldn't you be depressed? You don't have any friends. You hate your job. I mean, I just was like, so what are you going to change? That, yeah, I mean, it's tough out there, but you got to change something. And we, yes, sometimes we're down so low and we're not capable of, taking the action steps that we need to. But that should be a temporary situation. That shouldn't be your whole life. And to be depressed when you find out, your child is terminally ill, to be depressed when your husband leaves you, to be depressed when you find out that your friend stole, all your money from you or whatever. That's normal. That's normal. And so I think a lot of what's going on, the anxiety and the depression that we're seeing just everywhere, this is normal. Well, who wouldn't be anxious? People's phones are dinging 5 million times a day. Nobody can really afford the food that they would maybe like to get. That the stuff that's being blasted on social media and the news about the next variant of this and the next war over there. I think it is a completely normal response to be depressed and anxious. And why am I not depressed and anxious? Because I have fostered a connection with spirit. I feel safe. I feel loved. I feel valued. I feel joy. But it's in spite of what I'm surrounded by. The world is not supporting my mental well-being.
Right. It demands a countercultural life, which
Yes.
when you're down and you're depressed and you're low, there's no energy. The thought of like literally fighting the flow that we're all in, ugh, there's no energy for that, right? So it's like, okay, how do people just take that first, what's that first step of like, how do I connect with myself? How do I connect with my sense of something greater than me? How do I connect with love? Just the vibration of true, real love when you're in the midst of what would be labeled depression, anxiety, whatever.
I mean, what I've said to the people that I've loved dearly who have been suffering, I said, just ask for help. Every day when you wake up, if you can only do one thing, just say, God, spirit, guardian angel, whoever, I need help. Ask for help. That is, no matter how depressed you are, you can do that.
Yeah.
And, ask for that connection. It will show up for you. It will. My daughter has gone through a lot in her life. And, I've been banging that drum of, do 3 things a day. When I was very depressed, God, I was probably in my 30s. I would make myself do 3 things a day that needed to be done. Whether it was, so low that it was like brush your teeth,
Make your
you
bed.
know, make your bed. Yeah, exactly. It was 3 things, and I could check it off that I did it that day. 3 things. Some days, just in doing those 3 things, I ended up doing 30 things, and I ended up being fine. Some days, those 3 things were just like very difficult, but I held myself to the standard of doing 3 things. And my daughter, who I've been, trying to teach her about that connection and all of that. She's funny. Yesterday, she's like, Mom, I've been doing all the things that you talk about, I've been doing this great, being grateful. And I've been telling myself every morning, I look in the mirror and I tell myself, I love you. I love you. And doing, she's been telling me these things. And she's like, and I call on my guardian angel and I call on spirit and she said, and something happened today. She said, I was getting ready to do this online course that she's doing for a driving thing. And she said, all of a sudden, I felt this chill come through me, but it was a good chill. And I picked up a pen and she said, this just came out. I want to read it because, this is, I think it's just beautiful. It just came out. Mountains do not rise without earthquakes. Life is temporary. We are just passing through. Take that risk, even when it feels like the ground beneath you is cracking and crumbling, because the cracks that were made when it felt like the world was breaking to pieces revealed the raw pain, shame, anger, fragility, and impotence we all have as humans. It may seem to be broken or in ruin, but in actuality, we can now see through the literal and metaphorical cracks because of that earthquake. Because what seemed like the end, if you choose, could really be the beginning of your healing and your rising. Mountains do not rise without earthquakes.
Like my jaw is like,
Right?
wow.
That just came to her and through her. And I mean, this is a woman who's been through so much, and it's not my story to tell. Like, it's not my story to tell. But let me tell you, it's a story. And she has every reason to be anxious and depressed and all of that. And she just said, in doing these little things, Mom, I've been doing them. And spirit met her.
Yeah.
Spirit met her. And I mean, that speaks to our world too, right? The cracks and what is being revealed is the fragility and the impotence and all of that that we are feeling as a species.
Mm. Wow. So it's maybe just showing up consistently in the little things that can crack a window, crack a door, let a little bit of that light in. That's incredible. And just from knowing her story, I'm so glad you shared that. Wow.
Uh,
I'm just like truly speechless. That's incredible.
so there's always hope, right? There's always hope. And for those of you who are suffering with any kind of mental illness, there's nothing wrong with you. You feel badly in a world where things are going badly. And that's natural. And give yourself grace and find ways to be gentle with yourself and love yourself. And thank yourself for being someone who can still feel. You can still feel. And if you feel sad, you can still feel. There are people walking around out there so numb to all of this, and it looks like they're mentally well.
Right.
They can't even feel anymore. And feeling is a beautiful gift, and we need the feelers if we want there to be any healers.
Wow. Yes, there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-mm.
Your unique expression, you are here for a specific purpose, and you're in good company.
Yeah. Yes. All right. I feel like we're complete. What do you think?
Yeah, I do too. I also just want to say, if you're on medication, if you're getting treatment for something right now, please don't.
Don't
We don't.
stop taking your meds because of
Yeah,
us. Okay, we don't want to be responsible.
right. Only you know your body. You are the expert on your body, and yeah, we hope that something from today can be supportive.
And if you ever need support or help on your journey, reach out. because between the two of us, we have a wide breadth of information, understanding, and modalities to help you return to a fuller expression of who you really are.
Mm. Yes, queen.
All right.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.